Welcome everyone who's joining us tonight for the Montgomery College Professional Development Speaker Series for college students. We're so happy tonight to have with us Mandana Ahmadi, who is coming to us from London, but she's also coming to us from Montgomery College in her history. She was a honors physics student, I won't say how many years ago, but quite enough years ago to get her where she is now. Transferred to the University of Maryland, got her undergraduate degree in physics, and then went on to study computational neuroscience at the
UCLA, University College London.
University College of London. I had it at UCLA, I think, in the promo material. We can correct that. In London, which is where she is now with her company. So welcome, Mandana, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for having me, and thanks everybody for sharing your evening with me. I think it is best to use today's meeting for me to tell you why I came to be fascinated by the brain, and tell you about my journey of how that fascination has fueled my passion for ending suffering and injustice, and how it has opened doors for me to do something tangible that I hope to see one day, a world in which everybody is empowered. So this is what I'm going to talk about now. So I came to Montgomery College to study physics, as Rebecca said, because that's the knowledge I needed to have to be able to understand how the brain works. So it may sound a bit strange, but bear with me. Tonight I will share my story with you, and it will become a little clearer why physics and how physics has helped me understand the brain a bit, like how to apply that. So I spent the first 8 years of my life during Iran-Iraq war. It meant sirens and bunkers and sounds of explosion. Of course, it didn't help that I was living with my family on the Air Force Base. I would watch fighter planes take off, military convoys come and go, and in between hiding in school bunker and forced blackouts, I would wonder about how the pilots felt. Those who had come to bomb us and those who were taking off to the enemy's land to do the same thing. All I knew was that being a grown-up meant being tired, to argue a lot, that they don't become hungry. I mean, it's funny, I barely saw my parents eat really. They would refuse meals so that we would have enough to eat. And then one day, just like that, everybody was happy. They would hug each other, they would dance on the streets. And I remember clearly, I was actually terrified. It was like I had woken up in a parallel universe of which I knew nothing. So I asked what's going on, and I was told war is over. I couldn't understand what it meant because all I knew was that there is war. And so I was told it means there won't be any more airplanes coming to kill us. Now that I could understand. And for the first time in my life, I saw grown-ups doing these strange things that I didn't know they could do. For example, laughing together. I mean, yeah, it was really revolutionary for me to see that. But that magic lasted only a month or two. After that, although people had picked up bits and pieces of their broken lives to build it back together, they were again as tired, scared, and angry as before. For the first time, I had seen that they could be different, but then they weren't. Even though the war was over, I mean, you see, I was lucky to see such a sudden overnight change and its impact on people's mental state in such a short period of time. And to be old enough to wonder, what happened now? Where did it all go? What happened to the happiness that was there? I mean, to give you an analogy, it's like if you spent your whole life in dark, that's the status quo. That's me before war was over. If you see the daylight, then you realize there is a better way of being. And that's when I saw people being so happy when the news was announced that war is over. And then when you're put back in the darkness again, the thought of that light, the thought of this alternative stays with you. It drives you and motivates you to go and get it back again. I wanted people to be happy and euphoric again. I mean, it really felt good to be in between people who felt that way. So It took me a few good years and lots of ups and downs until I realized this all has to do with how the brain, with the brain and how it works. In fact, I was in my mid-20s when I learned about PTSD. And only then I realized that what everybody around me had when I was growing up was PTSD. I had grown up in a culture where the mind is never ill, and strokes are the only thing one needs to know about the brain. So it was very difficult for me to get information or understanding about how the brain relates to what people feel and do and how it impacts their day-to-day life decisions and how they set their life. So, but I did have a hunch that brain is playing a big part in all of that. So I decided to study the brain and find out for myself. And the best bet for me back then was to study pharmacology. And I aimed to do research on the brain. And that's what I did that's what I did when I went to university the first time. The year I was applying, there were 1.2 million applicants and 300 seats available to study pharmacology. So you can imagine that year, I married my books. That's all I did. And I made it through and learned so much about chemistry and neurobiology of the brain and its diseases. I was the only one who would do research outside coursework and credits, just for the love of finding out more about the brain beyond what the books were offering us. And then one day I was asked, given that I'm this crazy about understanding the brain, do I know what computational neuroscience is? I didn't. So I took a 9-hour bus ride to go to Tehran and sit in a 3-day workshop that was an introduction to computational neuroscience. And it was delivered by John Hertz of Nordita from Copenhagen and John Rinzel of NYU. And it was John Hertz who changed my life. He enabled me to walk in the path that has led me to this moment in time. He taught me the first alphabets of computational neuroscience and told me if I wanted to become a computational neuroscientist, I would have to switch my field to physics. The reason? While in physics, we write equations for how a plane flies, in computational neuroscience, we write equations for how the brain works. This, I decided, was the unique and this was so unique and close to helping me understand the brain that without hesitation, I decided to switch fields. Now you can imagine my mom's reaction. She thought I've gone crazy. After all I had done, and like literally for every seat in my pharmacology course, there were 4,000 applications made. So she thought like, I'm throwing away a good career with a good salary, and for what? It just beats her. But anyways, I packed my bags and I arrived in Maryland at Montgomery College to learn how to mathematically describe physical systems. I got my associate degree and transferred and graduated with honors in physics from University of Maryland, College Park. And I did all of that within 3 years of arriving in the US. I was in a rush to get to London to pursue a PhD in computational neuroscience. Back then, Gatsby unit at UCL was the only place on the planet that would solely focus on training graduates in this field, together with teaching them about machine learning and artificial intelligence. When I arrived at Montgomery College, I met many amazing people. The faculty were teaching from real life experiences rather than parroting textbooks that they had just mastered over the course of their own studies. One of my favorite courses that I still remember to this day was Modern History of Middle East. It was taught by a retired US diplomat, and we had many engaging conversations and discussions about modern historical events, including the war I had grown up in. He helped me understand the human side of it so much better. Anyways, I don't need to tell you that life is messy and more than often cruel. Katharine Hepburn said, life is hard. After all, it kills you. But I have learned that we can choose what of the things around us define us and what of the things around us inspire us. And to be honest, the faculty at Montgomery College, they're doing such an amazing job at this. So let's do a thought experiment. I'm going to share a photo. So I want you to take a moment and think about what you see here. Okay. I lived in the town through which this river flows for about 2 years. I visited this river at least once per week. And I tell you, it was one of the best teachers that I have had. My friends were puzzled, right? When they would look at this river, all they saw was filth. They saw negligence and disrespect. They saw a place they wanted to get away from. Me, I would sit by the river and see all the plants that were so ferociously full of life, soaking in the sun and turning this unsightly water into fragrance and beauty. I would see a masterwork of a bridge that has been standing proudly there for over 7 decades, never needing repair. And I could spend hours thinking of those who had planned and built it, their reasons, their hopes, their dreams. I would see cars and buses busily driving forth and back, carrying people who each of them would have a bag full of stories about life. I would see the fish snubbing the harsh environment and thrive despite of it all. I could only see resilience, hope, and love for life, and a determination to not let the environment hinder them from becoming the best of what they are. And sitting there, I had the urge to protect this celebration of life. So before leaving, I would clear away some of the rubbish and I would go on to campaign for taking better care of it. Now, a few years later, during my graduate studies, I learned that there is a scientific term for this. And in fact, it is a heavily studied function of the brain. It is called attention bias. It is our brain's way of selecting what to attend to as the world is so crowded with information. We can't just, take everything in. We have to be selective about it. And we all have this attention bias. Some of us are more prone to focus on the negative, such as the filth and dirt, and some of us tend to select the positive, such as the delicate daisy or the silvery fish. So I learned a lot about the brain during my PhD, and I learned a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning and how they together are yins and yangs of future of technology and human advancement. I also learned how lots of horrid things can happen and how they happen because of our ignorance about the neurodiversity that exists from brain to brain, and how this ignorance makes us so cruel towards ourselves and others. We are always told of the smart, the strong, the fast, the super social and canny ones who do wonders. The brain that is born and then nurtured to succeed. That brain doesn't really exist, just as the photoshopped perfect images on the magazine's covers don't exist in real life. You see, no one is truly successful because they are geniuses or street smart or born into wealth and health. Media likes to make those stories about lone conquerors and superhumans, giving the impression that they are them and then there are us mortals. But you see, I believe success comes when our brain and our goals and our environment align. That is when a person can move mountains. Helen Keller didn't have the gift of sight or hearing, but we all know how she opened the doors to others in a way no one else had done before. Maya Angelou was an activist who had selective mutism. Thomas Edison was practically deaf. What made these people successful was that their brain was good at, and their goals in their life and their environment was aligned. Those are the stars that need to align to bring about success. So this brings me to the last part of my story, which is Ayah. I co-founded Ayah so that everybody has a chance at aligning their stars. We are on a mission to empower everybody to understand their mind better and know when and where they have strengths and weaknesses, and how to turn things around using their strengths and understanding the limits. We believe that when everybody is at their best, that is when the world will become a better place. And happiness won't be considered a luxury. Life is not about competition. It is about celebration, discovery of the things we are naturally equipped to excel at, and tenderly love the bits of ourselves and others that are less than perfect. So with the power of computational neuroscience and advancement of mobile technology, as well as machine learning, we can now bring a deep understanding of how individual brains function and operate and give it directly to people on their mobile phones. We want to bring this empowerment to everybody, whether they can talk and express themselves or they are struggling to speak and put words together. understanding and empowerment should not be only for those who can elegantly express and discuss their thoughts and feelings in a one-to-one session with a therapist, or have the wealth, to go and see coaches and specialists. It should be for everybody, no matter what barriers they're imprisoned by. And that is how we are going to break those barriers using the science that computational neuroscience gives us. So we are at the beginning of our journey, and founding a deep tech company has not been without its challenges. But I have the fortune of standing next to a great co-founder whose passion, kindness, and energy makes it possible to weather anything that comes our way. And of course, we're supported by an amazing team, each and every one of them fundamental to the success of Ayah. As Helen Keller said, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. Thank you. So I'm more than happy to take any questions you have or any thoughts.
Thank you so much, Mandana. I was enthralled, and normally I'm writing down lots of questions, but it was like I just I couldn't stop listening long enough to listen to my own brain think of questions.
That's very kind of you. Thank you, Rebecca.
No, that's fine. I wonder though, and the rest of you too, you might have been in the same position now that we're kind of loosened up a little bit. If you want to go ahead and put your questions in there, I'll catch them up. But I did want to ask you a little bit, if you could explain to us the technology that you use at Ayah, because I think it's fascinating and it brings together such diverse kinds of expertise and things. If you could just tell us, like, how does that work? What is it?
So, I mean, I give an analogy first, and then I'll give an example. So the idea is that let's think of the brain as a machine that has been evolved to help us do things, right? So now think about robotics. When you think of creating a robot that go and do things, we write equations that would govern behavior of that robot, right? So whenever the robot behaves, that is always according to some equations. And then we just observe and they go and do things. Now what we do is do the reverse. We say, let's observe the behavior and then write down the governing equations that would give rise to those behavior. So in robotics, you write equation to exhibit behavior. In computational neuroscience, you observe behavior and write equations that would reproduce those behaviors. Now, the observations usually come from, the observations has been happening for a very long time in the field of psychology, like from the Pavlovian learning, when Pavlov had his dog and he would learn about conditioning and all sorts of stuff, all the way to very, very advanced experiments in terms of like PTSD and things like that. So we have a wealth of knowledge and understanding about observing behavior in a controlled environment where we understand what the environment is about and how people behave in there. And we take that and then we write the equations that would literally reproduce those behaviors. And these equations are made in a way that you can even predict like what would come next. Like if you change this and that of the environment, how would this person's behavior would change? And you can actually do that because effectively the brain has been evolved to master solving things. And yeah, unfortunately, as unflattering as it is, yeah, you can do that. So I don't know if you want more concrete examples or if that would do, or.
Well, I think it's so it is. It's totally fascinating to think of the brain as a computer and or as something that can be computated and be, you can predict on it. I do have, oh my gosh, I do have somebody who's asking if you can give a concrete example. So if you can,
Yes.
we'll do that and then I'll tell you this next question.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So an example of it would be about decision making, right? So a lot of times we have to think of it that you want to buy a house or you want to marry someone, right? So you can't just jump and decide, oh, I want to buy this house or I'm going to marry that person. You observe, you go and collect information. So what you're effectively doing, you go and collect samples of, is this the right person? I have this understanding, is it correct? So you gather these samples of information. So in a way, it is an integration of information that you're doing. And then depending on your goal, usually you in electric engineering terms, you set a boundary on your decision-making thing. So you integrate information, and when the information you collected hits a good enough criteria, then you make a choice. Either it's a yes or a no. I'm going ahead or I'm not going ahead. Now, The funny thing is that this example that I gave you in the World War II was used to break German codes. So this is known as drift diffusion models. And yeah, it's kind of like a very interesting, fascinating thing where you can actually, in the presence of uncertainty, how we actually integrate data. And it's kind of like a probabilistic combination. It's a statistical problem. And it turns out we are amazing at it. And it's exactly the kind of effectively computations humans use to make their decisions, day-to-day decisions. So we use the same exact computational technique and we let people make decisions and we fit it and voila, it works. You can actually see how they make decisions exactly like supercomputers.
So Mandana, to follow on to your example, if I came to you and I said, I don't know if I should marry this person or not, you would have me do some activities and then you could map out the way I'm making those decisions and that would help me make the decision. Is that how that works?
So that is a bit more, yes. I mean, effectively, maybe in a year or two, 1 or 2 years down the line, we would be able to tell you based on who you are, what your goal is, how to think about it, how to go about it, how are you collecting information, and give you information, like give you an understanding of how your brain is actually operating and collecting this information. And if you're content with it, just go ahead with it. And if you're not content with it, okay, these are the things to watch out for. It's just that, think about it, like the kind of computations we use to predict people's, to model how their brain works is similar again, and how, some of them are used in navigation systems, for example, for building autopilots for airplanes or Navy ships and things like that. But the same principle holds exactly as how we course correct our decisions and how we do things. It's not too different, actually.
Fantastic. And we do have, I guess it's Rosalie had a question that I think maybe is just another example, but she says, are you working on rewiring the brain of subjects with PTSD to make it more conducive for them to be successful? Does that fit into your paradigm?
So this is the thing. The brain, as we've been speaking, our brain keeps rewiring. That's the thing about the brain. It's very plastic. It keeps changing. Just opening even if our eyes is closed and we're sleeping, it's changing. It's an ever-changing thing. So one of the things that we are interested in is why. Imagine many people see an event. Some people get traumatized to the point of not being able to function. And some people see it, they get inspired, they go do things, and some people see it and it doesn't faze them at all. So one of the things we are interested in is why? What's the difference between the brain of the person who gets traumatized and the brain of the person who is not? How is it that their brains are different from each other? So the very first thing that we try to do is to tell a person who has PTSD is not that something is wrong with you, but what is it about your brain that has made you prone in like that? So think of it like this. To us, brain behavior and our reactions is very similar to how our skin reacts to sun and things like that, right? So we have this belief that we are all here because we made it through the genetic lottery of evolution, right? Our ancestors survived things and then we are here. So however we are, somebody down the evolutionary line, being like that was good, because they survived, okay? So what we try to do is to give people that understanding that if things are not correct, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something is different. And B, help the person understand in what way am I different? And why is this environment doing this to me, right? And C, what are the things you can do about it? Not necessarily, if you can choose that I want to change, like people might decide to put sun cream on and, hat on and do all of those kind of things and slowly recover and function and do all sorts of things. Or I just don't like it. I go away. I go do something else. This is not the environment I want to be in. So it's not necessarily to say we rewire them to fix them. It's not that. It's a choice people have to make for themselves. It's more about giving them the power to understand what's going on and then make a choice based on that. And yes, recovery from PTSD, it does require rewiring of the brain, but so does psychotherapy. Any kind of psychotherapy does that. Even when we sit in the class and we learn music or art, our brain gets rewired.
There are a couple of questions here that are just sort of like, nuts and bolts questions. One person wants to know about what your PhD thesis was on, and another person wants to know why you chose Montgomery College. So I don't know, we might as well put
Yeah,
those
of course.
together.
Yes. I will tell you about my PhD thesis first, and then I'll tell you about my Montgomery College. So my PhD thesis, it was about understanding decision making and also understanding how we perceive environment. So I developed models. One of them was about decision making, about deciding when to decide. Can we write something that could actually put people in an environment and then they make choices and everything? And can I tell if this person is going to behave in a certain way? And the question then would be, why are people different? And one of the things we found out, and it was purely without asking the people at all, we found out the differences between people in terms of those who would beat themselves up if they make a mistake, and people who were lenient towards themselves. They were okay to make a mistake when they made a decision. And these all came out only from the equations that we wrote and the fits that we made in terms of the behavioral thing. And it was quite an interesting thing for people, like, oh, yeah, that's true, but I didn't tell you that. But like, well, your behavior shows it. So that was one. And then another thing was about how do we combine sources of information? Like if for us to make a decision, as I said, it's very important to integrate information in the right way. So decision making can go wrong if we integrate in the wrong way. Imagine an example is this: you want to buy a house and somebody comes and tells you, oh, the house is, I don't know, $500,000. And if you want the garden, you have to pay another 100,000. So you combine them together, it's $600,000. And then somebody else comes and tells you, oh, you know what? This house and the garden is only worth $550,000. So how are you going to now combine these two together? Because now it's different. You can't just add them, right? And then here comes these different aspects of, do I trust this information? Who is more reliable? How certain am I? And this then becomes these statistical combinations of sources of information. And this is another modeling that I did in terms of seeing about behavior when you're in these different environments. How do people combine? And it's incredible. It's incredible how well people do that. And they don't even notice it. Like they don't even realize how well they do that. Just incredible. So that's what my PhD thesis was on. And why did I come to Montgomery College? So if you remember, I told you about John Hertz, the person who introduced me to this world of computation and neuroscience. And when I said to him that, okay, I'm changing. So what? I don't have money, but you know how ambitious I am. And you know that I want to have a foundation that can help me do that. So tell me where to go. And he actually told me, go to Montgomery College. And I asked, he's American. And I asked him, but why? Why Montgomery College? And he said to me, that is where you are going to meet the best people who have done changes in their careers, and they come there to teach students how to be that. You won't only learn about the best physics, that has to offer to you. You also learn about how to make change. These are people who care. And and I care. I also wanted to learn that. Physics was not the only thing I wanted to learn. And when I came to Montgomery College, behold, an example of it is Dr. Day. He's there. Ask him. He knows of all the meetings and all the conversations we have had. Incredible person, very modest. I mean, I don't want to embarrass him, but you should hear his stories. It's one of the best places I have ever been. And I have been sitting in Harvard, MIT. I've been to all kinds of places, but Montgomery College is very different. And I'm so glad and thankful to John to tell me to go to MC because, solid foundation, not only in science, but also in life. If you're willing to reach out to all the faculty and all the things they have to offer, because they are there because they care. They're not there because they want to make a name. They want to make the next generation of people, and they do it. That was my experience, and I'm so glad I did it.
That's incredible. I'm sure that there are a number of us on here who are just like blushing with pride right now. Oh, goodness.
It is one of the best places.
Thank you so much. This someone wants to know if what you are working with can help us understand why people stay in unhealthy or abusive relationships.
Yes, so that there are many different reasons for it. And so again, you see, when we make decisions, it's based on what we hope to achieve and what information we have in our hands, right? And often the case, and of course it depends case to case, and I think there are experts here who are more qualified to talk about this than me, but often the case in abusive relationship, the abuser creates an alternate reality for the person. So they are not anymore in real world. They don't notice or see things. They suffer, but they think it's their fault. So instead of, in terms of variables, if they were to update variables of their decision making, they update the wrong thing, which is their own behavior. They optimize the wrong function. And the reason is that attention that I spoke of, it, that is our brain's way of trying to collect information and put things together to tell us what to do next. The abuser usually kind of like gets hold of that system and constantly forces the person to attend to the things that would not make them see the reality in a way and collect information in the wrong way, or they just exhaust them. They're just so tired that they don't care anymore to go and understand and change and fight and do things. So there are many facets that comes to it, but often the case, it really is that I don't know if you are or if you know somebody, one has to be very tender and understanding that it's not on purpose or that they've called for it or they want it. It's just that they need someone there who can slowly guide them out to reality. And that is very tough. It's a very tough thing, actually. So
That's really interesting. So that kind of brings me to one of the two final questions that I have for you. And one of those is that I know that Ayah is doing some, uh, it's not really, I guess, pilot testing or doing
yes,
some work right now that where people can actually get involved and be part of that.
yes,
You want to
yes.
talk about that? I'd love to hear.
Yes, of course. And we would love it if, if you would try it and give us feedback. But as I said, we are trying to build this environment where people can play these, we call them games, but these are like safe environments where you do things. And then on the back end, we run these tests and analysis to tell the person where they stand with respect to the population and what does it mean. As I gave the example, good and bad of it. It's not that it's bad or good, but like, what does it mean? So we have this very small teaser that we've built, which has this 4-session. The focus of it is to help, we are not yet advertising it as such, but the main focus of it is to help people with social anxiety, because we call it mother of all demons. And yes, so it has 4 sessions, kind of like covering the 4 core like drivers of social anxiety. 2 of them come with these behavioral games, where one of them is like about a minute and the other one you play for like 3 minutes. And of course, also with some questionnaires that the specialists in our team have put together, very short ones, to literally just look at those cognitive things, like instead of the brain as a whole, just like look at the specific, how does your attention works? How does, for example, your self-compassion works? And how do you do, like, how do you deal with it? And also a little bit of an exercise to see, for the person to learn, oh, so in this way, I can modify or take control of this particular system. So it's a very small one. And majority of it is for us, before we build it out totally, it's about user experience, about people like, okay, yes, I like it or I don't like it, change this or change that. My belief is that nobody knows the solution to mental health problems, but we all, literally all of us, hold a piece of the puzzle. And it will take all of us. We have to all work together and talk together and think together so that we can solve this thing.
Is there a place, do you think, for the kind of work that you're doing in an educational setting?
Yes. And in fact, I think it's very important, because what education is, at least to my limited knowledge, it's trying to actually understand how a person's brain functions and then try to help them to become like the best, teach and learn, and then go and apply it somewhere to something, right? So And in that way, it really matters for us to have a better understanding of how the brain works. And I give an example here, in the interest of time, a short one. And of course, this is something that we are working on, not heavily published or anything, but I would love to talk about this later if people are interested. But take, for example, autism, right? So autism is very difficult, and we know a lot of difficulty that comes with it. It's a very broad thing. Now, if you look at one end of it, which kind of like traditionally was classified as Asperger's, one in computational neuroscience, we understand them as heavily model-based driven brains, okay? And this is something that in, this is a kind of a special kind of computation that robots and planes and all of those things, they do have it. And what this means is that all of us have different learning systems in our brain. Think of them as like different colors. And then depending on the situation, we mix and match them to some degree. Some of them is like habitual learning, for example. That's one learning system. We do things habitually. Another learning system is this model-based system where we try to develop a model. Like, for example, when we understand physics, it uses that model-based system because we try to understand the variables. We try to understand what are the players are, and then build a model of things and how they click together. And that's another system. We all have it. Now, we have this hypothesis, and I think there's enough evidence to support it, that when it comes to to Asperger's, for example, they rely heavily on that system. So they build models. So for example, even though people think rote learning is the way, but if one has and that's a very slow system. It works with model-based, works with repetition, and it's very slow. But once you get it, it zooms. Like you master and you're the best. Like nobody can compete with you, but it needs patience. And it needs understanding how this person actually, how are they building these models in their head, in their little head. So this is how we can go about it, because then we can say, okay, it seems this person is heavily making use of their model base. So you don't need to have a diagnosis of autism to be able to do that. But it's like, you might not, you don't have to have social difficulties or anything. We know a lot of people who are socially apt, but they're also very model based. And what that would also mean is, you see, very prone to uncertainty and change. It just drives them nuts. Why? They built this delicate model and you change it, it drives everybody mad, right? So then you'll understand them better. Then it's not anymore, what is this fit? What's the fuss about, right? Well, there should be a fuss given what you've done right now. So this is how we are hoping that having that deeper understanding of the brain can also help educators to know how to reach out to people and how to help them understand their functioning and not be frustrated with themselves. That everybody else just flew through the whole thing and I'm still struggling trying to figure out 1 + 1 is 2. Why is 1 + 1 + 2, But to know that if you nurture that person is going to be the next who knows what kind of engineer who will do what. But if we don't understand them and we break them, that's one life lost. And it's a pity for it. So I think understanding the brain is crucial to a successful education system. I don't know how else one can do it. And I think the best teachers are those who are actually intuitively get the kids, they get the students, and they can do that magically. But what if we can do that for everybody? So that's how I think of it.
It would be a wonderful thing to have a professional development seminar that was just on that for faculty. It really would. We'll maybe calling on you for that. Super. Okay, so my last question is really about the future and what you see as your goal for Ayah Technologies, or is it like beyond that? What is driving you right now to do what you're doing and what your plans are?
I mean, my long-term vision, our long-term vision of me and the team and everybody is to literally to contribute to the world in a way that we can help people understand themselves and others. And our idea is that when we empower people in that way, You see, nobody can change themselves. We can't do anything for others. It's the person that can do things, right? And usually people don't do things because they don't know what to do. It's not like they're malicious or they like to, it's just they need help. They need an understanding of themselves. They need to feel normal. They need to know nothing is wrong. It's okay. They just need to hear it's okay and really be honest that it's okay. So our vision is to tell people that, yes, it's tough right now, but that's the reason, and you'll be okay there. And this is how, if you want to be in this tough situation, this is how to be okay. And we believe if you bring that kind of empowerment to people, what it would mean is you can start flourishing. People will start flourishing. It's not anymore lives wasted, struggling, trying to find themselves, be coerced by peer pressure, political whatevers, You take ownership of your life. You're in control of your life. And I want my daughter and my son to live in a universe where people are in control of their lives, a justice system that is kind. So, and crimes never happening because very early on we understand people, right? And we can help them and put them in a path that instead of just, accidentally and ignorantly things happening, they can go flourish, become who knows what. And who knows what kind of, I think that's a kind of a heaven that I would like my kids to live in. And that is one of the reasons that we are creating Ayah. And, the day when I was told that war is over, that euphoria, that feeling of hope, the feeling that now I can live my life. Now I know how to build it and nobody is going to ruin it. There is hope. I can build. My kids have a future. That was the reason people were happy. That was the reason there was that euphoria. So hope is something that is necessary for things to move forward. And hope cannot happen if people don't have control and a view and, know what they're going to do. And this is what we're trying to bring to people with Ayah.